She made a long-serving housekeeper weep as she watched her lose her pension, and she barely blinked. For 15 years, this millionaire's sister terrorized everyone in her home. Nobody dared to challenge her. Nobody even tried, until the day a new black maid with sharp eyes and nothing left to fear uncovered her family's darkest secret. This is the true story of how one woman brought down a monster. Not with money or power, but with a single word. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never look at entitled people the same way again. This is a story about revenge. No, it's about something far more powerful than that. Stay with me. Welcome to Eva's Stories. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you a story about what happens when someone finally says enough. In the hills above the city, there was an estate called Holmes Manor. Not just any estate, mind you. This was the kind of place where a single room held more wealth than most people see in a lifetime. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers like frozen stars. The silverware was polished daily. Even the air felt expensive. And in this world of luxury and whispers, there was one name that made everyone freeze: Natalia Holmes. She was the sister of Julian Holmes, a tech billionaire whose companies shaped the future. His money built empires that changed the world. But Cassandra, she built something different. She built an empire of fear. Every single day, from the moment she woke until she retired to her suite, she would patrol the estate. Always dressed like royalty, always with those cold eyes scanning for imperfection, and always ready to destroy someone's life if they dared to displease her. The staff would literally shake when she entered a room. They'd seen what she could do. There was Dorothy Thompson, Miss Dot they called her, a woman who'd served the Holmes family for 20 years. She'd raised Julian from a boy. She'd been loyal through everything. But one day, Cassandra noticed a single water spot on a crystal vase. Just one. Miss Dot was fired on the spot, stripped of her pension. And according to those who were there, Cassandra didn't just fire her. She watched the old woman pack her things and leave in tears. And she smiled. That's the kind of person Natalia Holmes was. Now into this world walked a woman named Imani Washington. Imani was 32 years old, and 6 months ago, her life had fallen apart. She'd been running her own small business, a boutique consulting firm helping nonprofits with their communications strategy. She loved that work. She was good at it too, finding solutions that others missed, building narratives that connected people to purpose. But then the funding dried up. Her biggest client pulled out. Smaller clients couldn't afford her rates, and just like that, her dream was gone. The business she'd built from nothing collapsed in 3 months. She'd poured everything into that business. Her savings, her time, her belief that she could make a difference. She'd worked with youth programs, homeless shelters, community health clinics, organizations that did real work but didn't know how to tell their stories. Imani had given them voices. She'd helped them secure grants, attract donors, build support. And she'd been good at it, really good. She'd won awards. Her clients' funding had increased by an average of 40%. She'd been featured in a business journal as one of the city's rising entrepreneurs to watch. Then the economy shifted. Nonprofit budgets tightened. Her anchor client, a large community foundation, consolidated their communications in-house. 3 other clients followed within weeks. Imani tried to pivot, to find new markets, but the momentum was gone. 6 months of declining revenue became 3 months of panic. Then one morning, she was sitting in her empty office realizing she couldn't make next month's rent. The business closed on a Tuesday. By Friday, Imani was standing in the employment office, swallowing her pride and asking what positions were available for someone with her skills. The counselor had looked at her resume and frowned. "You're overqualified for most entry-level positions, and frankly, Employers worry that people with your background will leave as soon as something better comes along. I need work now, Imani had said quietly. I have bills. I need to rebuild. The counselor had scrolled through her database. There's a house manager position at a private estate, Holmes Manor. It's domestic work, but it pays well. Very well, actually. They're looking for someone educated, professional, capable of managing inventory systems and staff coordination. Imani had taken the interview. She'd convinced herself it was temporary, just a way to save enough capital to relaunch. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. She'd work, save every penny, and start again. She got the job within 3 days. So there she was, adjusting the stiff collar of a house manager's uniform, trying to remember which polish went on which surface, feeling like she'd fallen from the sky and landed in a completely different universe. On her first day, an older housekeeper named Maria Santos pulled her aside. Maria had worked at Holmes Manor for 12 years. Her face showed every one of those years, etched with a wariness that came from surviving in hostile territory. "See that staircase?" Maria whispered, pointing to the grand double staircase in the entrance hall. "That's where she walks every morning at exactly 7:00 a.m., Natalia Holmes. Miss Cassandra, we have to call her. Julian's sister. You know him, right?" Imani nodded. Everyone knew Julian Holmes. He was in the news constantly. His tech innovations were changing healthcare, education, infrastructure. "Well, his sister," Maria continued, her voice dropping even lower. "She's our worst nightmare. One wrong move, one tiny mistake, and she'll have you fired. And she won't stop there. She'll make sure Julian blacklists you from every decent job in the country. I've seen her ruin people just for fun." Imani felt her stomach twist. "Is she really that cruel?" Maria's laugh was bitter. 6 months ago, she claimed that Jeffrey, the head of security, had disrespected her by not holding the door fast enough. He'd worked here for 8 years. Has a family, a mortgage. She had him fired that afternoon. Julian tried to give him severance, but Cassandra made sure every security firm in the state heard he was unreliable. Last I heard, he's working retail now. She paused, her eyes filling with pain. "And Miss Dot, Dorothy Thompson. You should have seen what she did to that woman." Imani leaned closer. "Tell me." Maria glanced around, making sure they were alone in the supply room. Miss Dot practically raised Julian. She was the housekeeper when he was just a boy after their parents died. She taught him to tie his shoes, helped him with his homework, stayed up with him when he had nightmares. She was family, you know, more than Cassandra ever was. What happened? Cassandra moved in about 15 years ago. She'd been living in New York, doing something in the arts, I think. Suddenly she showed up and just stayed. At first, she was civil enough, but over time, she started treating the house like her kingdom, started making rules, started inspecting everything, started firing people. Maria's hands twisted together. Miss Dot tried to shield the younger staff. She'd fix their mistakes before Cassandra could see them. She'd take the blame for things that weren't her fault. She was protecting us. And Cassandra found out. Worse. One morning, Cassandra was inspecting the library. She found a water ring on an antique side table. Just a faint mark, probably from condensation on a glass. She called Miss Dot in and demanded to know who was responsible. Miss Dot said it was her, even though we all knew she'd been off the day before. It couldn't have been her. Maria's voice cracked. Cassandra fired her on the spot. 20 years of service gone. And Miss Dot had been counting on her pension. She was 68 years old, had been planning to retire in 2 years. Cassandra stripped it all away, said if she was careless enough to damage antiques, she didn't deserve compensation. And Julian allowed this? Julian wasn't here. He travels constantly for business. By the time he got back, Miss Dot was already gone. He tried to send her money privately, but Miss Dot refused it, said she didn't want charity. She wanted justice. She wanted her pension, her dignity back. Julian couldn't override his sister without causing a family scandal. Imani felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't just cruelty. This was systematic destruction. Natalia Holmes was using her brother's wealth and influence to build a private fiefdom where she could torture people without consequence. That evening, Imani finally met Natalia Holmes. She moved through the house like a general inspecting troops. Her designer coat, belted and perfect, probably cost more than Imani would earn in 6 months. Jewelry sparkled at her wrists and throat, cold and brilliant. But it was her eyes that Imani noticed most. They were sharp, calculating. They swept across every surface, every corner, like weapons searching for targets. And Imani could actually see the staff flinch when that gaze passed over them. Julian Holmes walked beside his sister occasionally, a tall, distinguished man who looked perpetually exhausted. He was kind to the staff when Cassandra wasn't watching, but he never intervened when she was. He looked like a man trapped in a beautiful prison, paying his sister's cruelty with silence. Imani was assigned to manage the East Wing, which meant she was close enough to see everything, close enough to hear. For the first few days, she focused on learning the systems, the schedules, the impossible standards. The estate had 47 rooms spread across 3 floors. Every surface had to be spotless. Every object had to be in its exact place. Cassandra had created a binder, 3 inches thick, documenting the precise arrangement of every room. If a decorative pillow was 2 inches to the left of its designated position, it was considered a failure. The other staff members moved through the house like ghosts, trying to be invisible. There was Elena, a young woman from El Salvador who cleaned the bedrooms and never made eye contact. There was Marcus, who maintained the grounds and stayed outside as much as possible. There was the new head of security, a nervous man named Thomas, who'd replaced Jeffrey and clearly lived in constant fear of making the same mistake. They all had the same expression, the same tension in their shoulders. The same way of moving quickly but quietly, trying not to draw attention. But Imani couldn't help noticing Cassandra's behavior. The woman didn't just demand perfection, she demanded submission. Cassandra would inspect rooms that had already been cleaned, running her finger along surfaces, looking for any excuse. Every interaction was a test, a way to remind everyone around her that she had power and they had none. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon. Imani was in the grand dining room, reviewing the inventory with Maria, when Cassandra swept in unannounced. Maria's entire body went rigid. Cassandra walked slowly around the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. She stopped at one of the chairs, ran her hand along the upholstery, then held up her finger. "Dust," she said. One word. That's all it took to make the entire room feel like a courtroom. Maria's face went white. "Miss Cassandra, I cleaned that chair myself this morning. Are you contradicting me?" "No, ma'am. You just what? You just think I'm lying? You think I can't tell dust when I see it?" Cassandra's voice was soft, controlled, but it cut like a blade. Maria looked down, trembling. "No, ma'am." "You're fired. Pack your things and leave within the hour. And don't expect a reference." The words hung in the air like poison. Maria had 2 children, a mortgage, medical bills for her mother. Imani knew this because Maria had mentioned it during training, apologizing for seeming distracted. And as Imani stood there with a clipboard in her hands, watching this cruel performance, watching Maria's eyes fill with tears, she felt something ignite in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had running her business, the same fire that burned when she saw injustice, when she saw someone abusing their power. Maria had called this place a gilded cage. She was right. But what she didn't know was that Imani Washington had spent years learning how to find the cracks in perfect facades. She'd built a career on uncovering hidden truths, on finding the stories people tried to bury, and this woman, she suspected, had more cracks than anyone realized. Before Maria could move, Imani heard herself speaking. "Miss Cassandra, if I may." Her voice was calm, professional. "That chair was actually cleaned by the new service we hired for the upholstery. If there's dust, it's their responsibility, not Maria's. I can have them return this afternoon to address it." Cassandra's cold eyes turned to Imani. The look was assessing, dangerous. "And you are?" "Imani Washington, ma'am. The new house manager." "I don't recall asking for your input." "You didn't, ma'am. But Maria works under my supervision now. If there's a quality issue, it reflects on me, not her." The silence stretched. Cassandra studied Imani like she was examining a bug under glass, deciding whether to crush it or let it crawl away. "Very well," Cassandra finally said. "The service will return today, but if this happens again, you'll both be looking for new employment." She turned and left, her heels clicking away like warning shots. Maria grabbed Imani's arm, her grip desperate. "You shouldn't have done that." "Now she's focused on you." Imani watched Cassandra disappear around the corner. "I know." But what Imani didn't say was that being noticed might be exactly what she needed. Because if Natalia Holmes wanted to play games, Imani Washington knew how to do something even better. She knew how to investigate. She knew how to find patterns, inconsistencies, the small details that revealed larger truths. And in a house this old, with secrets buried this deep, with a woman this determined to maintain a perfect facade, there was always something to find. Imani thought about Miss Dot Thompson, fired after 20 years for protecting others. About Jeffrey, blacklisted for opening a door too slowly. About Maria, nearly destroyed over imaginary dust. This wasn't about cleanliness or standards. This was about power. About a woman who'd built her entire existence on making others small so she could feel large. And Imani had learned a long time ago that people who built their lives on lies always left evidence behind. You just had to know where to look. She turned back to Maria. "Tell me everything you know about how Cassandra came to live here. Start from the beginning." Maria looked uncertain. "Why?" "Because," Imani said quietly, "everyone has a story. And I have a feeling Miss Cassandra's story isn't quite what she pretends it is." Maria opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, the bell system chimed. 3 short rings. Cassandra was summoning staff to the main entrance. "Later," Maria whispered, her face going pale. "We have to go. Now." They hurried to join the other staff members assembling in the grand foyer. Cassandra stood at the top of the staircase like a queen addressing her subjects, checking something on her tablet. Julian was beside her, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. "The spring gala is in 3 weeks, Cassandra announced, her voice echoing off the marble. "I expect this estate to be flawless, not acceptable. Flawless. If any of you embarrass me in front of our guests, you won't just be fired. You'll be blacklisted from every respectable household in this city. Am I understood?" A chorus of, "Yes, Miss Cassandra," followed. Imani watched the performance, noting how Cassandra's eyes swept across the staff, lingering on faces, measuring fear. This wasn't about the gala. This was about reminding everyone of their place. Over the next few days, Imani observed carefully. She watched Cassandra move through the house, inspecting, criticizing, creating an atmosphere of constant anxiety. She watched the staff jump at shadows, triple-checking their work, moving with the nervous energy of people waiting for disaster. And she watched Julian Holmes, who seemed to live in a separate world from his sister. He was kind when he encountered staff members. He asked about their families. He thanked them for their work. But the moment Cassandra appeared, he retreated into silence, into some private space where he didn't have to confront what was happening in his own home. Imani had seen this dynamic before, in the nonprofits she'd worked with. The well-meaning board member who donated money but refused to address the toxic executive director. The wealthy patron who wanted to help but didn't want the discomfort of actually confronting injustice. It was Tuesday morning when everything changed. Imani was in the West Corridor reviewing the weekly supply inventory with Elena when she heard the sound. A sharp crack followed by Cassandra's voice, rising in volume, echoing through the marble halls. They both froze. "What did I just witness?" Cassandra's voice was shrill, uncontrolled in a way Imani hadn't heard before. This wasn't the cold, measured cruelty. This was something unhinged. Imani and Elena rushed toward the sound. They found Cassandra in the main gallery, the enormous room where Julian displayed his art collection. Maria stood in the center, frozen, a cleaning cloth in her hand. Thomas, the head of security, stood near the doorway, uncertain whether to intervene. Two other staff members had stopped mid-task, watching with horrified expressions. Cassandra was pointing at the floor, at a small scuff mark on the pristine white marble. It was maybe 2 inches long, barely visible unless you were looking for it. "Do you see this?" Cassandra's voice carried to every corner of the room. "Do you see what you've done to my floor?" "Miss Cassandra, I was just about to clean it," Maria said, her voice shaking. "Someone must have tracked it in. I'll remove it immediately." "Tracked it in?" Cassandra stepped closer, her face inches from Maria's. "This is your responsibility. You are responsible for maintaining these floors. And instead, you've allowed this desecration." Imani felt her hands tighten around her clipboard. This wasn't about a scuff mark. This was a performance. Cassandra had found an audience, and she was using Maria to demonstrate her power. "I'm sorry, Miss Cassandra." "I'll fix it right now." Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "You're sorry?" Cassandra's laugh was sharp, cruel. "You're sorry? Do you know what this floor costs? Do you have any concept of the value of anything in this house? Of course you don't. How could you? You're just—" She stopped, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air. Everyone knew what she'd been about to say. "You're fired," Cassandra said flatly. "Get out. Get out of my house." Maria's face crumpled. "Please, Miss Cassandra, I have children. I need this job." "Should have thought of that before you proved yourself incompetent. Thomas, escort her out." Thomas looked sick, but moved forward. Maria's cleaning cloth fell from her hands onto the marble floor, and that's when something inside Imani broke. Not broke, activated. She'd spent 6 months watching her business collapse, feeling powerless as forces beyond her control took everything she'd built. She'd spent weeks in this house watching cruelty disguised as standards, watching people with power use it to crush those without. And suddenly, she was done being invisible, done being silent, done watching. Imani stepped forward into the gallery. Her voice cut through the tension, calm and professional. "Miss Cassandra, if I may." Cassandra whirled. "Who gave you permission to speak?" "No one, ma'am. But I'm the house manager, and Maria reports to me. This scuff mark appeared this morning after the marble restoration specialists completed their work in the East Wing. They tracked the residue through here. I have their invoice if you'd like to see it." It was a complete fabrication. There were no restoration specialists. but Imani delivered it with such calm confidence that even Thomas blinked in surprise. Cassandra's eyes narrowed to slits. "Are you suggesting this isn't Maria's fault?" "I'm stating a fact, ma'am. The specialists were here at 6:00 a.m. before Maria began her shift. The mark wasn't here yesterday. Therefore, it's their responsibility, not hers. I'll contact the company immediately to have them return and address it." The silence in the gallery was absolute. No one challenged Cassandra. No one interrupted her performances. This simply didn't happen. Cassandra took a step toward Imani. Her voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. "You're new here, Ms. Washington, so perhaps you don't understand how things work. When I say someone is responsible, they are responsible. When I say someone is fired, they are fired. Am I making myself clear?" Imani met her eyes directly. "Crystal clear, ma'am. And when the restoration company confirms they caused the damage, as I know they will, I'll make sure to document it properly so this doesn't reflect poorly on your household management standards." It was brilliant. Imani had given Cassandra an out. She'd framed it not as defending Maria, but as protecting Cassandra's reputation, as if the issue was about maintaining proper records rather than about cruelty. Cassandra's jaw tightened. The calculation was visible in her eyes. She could fire both of them, but that would look impulsive, emotional. Or she could accept the explanation and maintain her facade of being about standards rather than sadism. "Fine," Cassandra said finally. "The company will address it. But Maria, if I ever see another mark, another spot, another single imperfection in this house, you're gone. Without severance, without reference. Do you understand?" "Yes, Miss Cassandra." Maria's voice was barely audible. Cassandra swept out of the gallery, her heels clicking against the marble like gunshots. The assembled staff slowly dispersed, not making eye contact, trying to become invisible again. Maria grabbed Imani's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "But she'll come for you now. She'll make your life hell." "I know." Imani watched Cassandra's retreating figure disappear around the corner. Thomas approached quietly. "That was brave and stupid. She doesn't forget." "Good," Imani said. "Neither do I." After everyone left, Imani stood alone in the gallery, looking at the small scuff mark on the marble. It would take 30 seconds to remove. A damp cloth, a gentle rub. Gone. This had never been about cleanliness or standards. This was about power, about a woman who needed to destroy others to feel alive, who needed to watch people beg, to watch them break, to confirm her own importance. Imani had spent her career helping organizations tell their stories, uncovering the narratives that connected people to purpose. She knew how to read between lines, how to spot inconsistencies, how to find the truth hiding beneath polished surfaces. And she'd just seen something in Cassandra's eyes during that confrontation. Something beyond cruelty. Something that looked like panic. People who were secure in their power didn't need to perform like this. They didn't need audiences for their cruelty. They didn't need constant validation through fear. People who built their entire existence on making others small usually did so because they were terrified of being seen as small themselves. Imani walked to the scuff mark and wiped it away with her sleeve. It disappeared instantly, as she'd known it would. Then she pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. She typed, "Natalia Holmes arrived 15 years ago. Maria said she was in New York before, doing something in the arts. Find out what." She couldn't be invisible anymore. Not after this. Not after watching another person nearly destroyed for sport. Her internal code, the same code that had driven her to help nonprofits find their voices, that had pushed her to give voice to the voiceless, wouldn't let her stand by and watch this continue. If Natalia Holmes wanted her attention, She had it now. And Imani Washington had just decided to do what she did best. She was going to investigate. The attacks began the next morning. Imani arrived at 6:00 a.m. as usual to find a handwritten note on her desk. Cassandra's elegant script covered the page with instructions. The library needed to be completely reorganized by noon. All 2,000 books, alphabetically by author, then by title, with separate sections for fiction, non-fiction, biography, and reference. Any book out of place would result in immediate termination. Imani read the note twice. The library had been organized last week. This wasn't maintenance. This was punishment. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By 11:45, every book was in its proper place. Imani double-checked each shelf, then triple-checked. At exactly noon, Cassandra swept into the library, clearly expecting chaos. Instead, she found Imani standing calmly beside perfectly organized shelves, a detailed inventory list in her hand. Cassandra's jaw tightened. She spent 20 minutes examining the shelves, running her finger along spines, looking for any mistake. She found none. "Adequate," she said finally, the word dropping like a stone. Then she left. The next day, it was the silver. Every piece in the house, over 300 items, needed to be polished and arranged in the formal dining room by 3:00 p.m. for a last-minute inspection. Cassandra provided no staff assistance, just Imani, alone, with 4 hours to complete a task that normally took 2 people a full day. Imani worked methodically, using every efficiency technique she'd learned running her business. She organized by size, worked in batches, and moved through the task with focused precision. At 2:55, the last piece was in place. Cassandra arrived at 3:00 exactly. She examined every fork, every spoon, every serving piece. She held them to the light, looking for spots, for streaks, for any evidence of failure. There was none. "Satisfactory," Cassandra said, her voice cold as winter. Then she left. On Thursday, it was the guest suites. All 12 of them needed fresh linens, complete cleaning, and floral arrangements. By 5:00 p.m., Cassandra specified which flowers, which vases, the exact angle of each arrangement. She provided photographs showing the required placement of every decorative pillow, every throw blanket. Imani enlisted Elena's quiet help for the linens, finished the cleaning by 3:00, and spent the final 2 hours on the flowers. At 5:00, Cassandra walked through each room with a measuring tape, checking the angle of pillows against her photographs. Every single room was perfect. Cassandra said nothing. She simply turned and walked away, her silence more ominous than criticism. That evening, Imani was in the staff break room making tea when Julian Holmes appeared in the doorway. He looked uncomfortable, like a man entering territory he knew he shouldn't avoid, but usually did. "Ms. Washington, may I have a word?" Imani set down her tea. "Of course, Mr. Holmes." He stepped inside but left the door open, maintaining propriety. "I wanted to thank you for your work this week. I've noticed you've taken on some rather extensive tasks." "It's my job, sir." "It's beyond your job description." Julian ran a hand through his graying hair. "My sister can be demanding. I apologize if you felt overwhelmed." Imani studied him carefully. He looked genuinely apologetic but also resigned, like a man who'd given up fighting battles long ago. "I manage fine, Mr. Holmes." "You've been working 12-hour days. I've noticed." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This is a bonus for your exceptional effort." Imani didn't take the envelope. "That's generous, but unnecessary. I'm simply doing what's asked of me." "Please." Julian set the envelope on the table. All the staff receive bonuses. It's the least I can do. There it was. The least he could do. Not intervene, not stop his sister's cruelty. Just pay money and hope it compensated for his cowardice. "Mr. Holmes, may I ask you something?" He looked wary. "Of course." "How long has your sister lived here?" The question clearly surprised him. 15 years. Why do you ask?" "Just curious." "We don't often hear about your family history." Julian's expression shifted, became guarded. "Cassandra had some difficulties in New York, personal matters. I offered her a place here to recover. She decided to stay." "I see. And before New York?" "Ms. Washington, I'm not sure why you're asking these questions." His voice had gone cool, professional. The warmth disappeared. "Forgive me. I was just making conversation." Julian picked up the envelope and placed it firmly on the table between them. "Take the bonus. You've earned it. And Ms. Washington, a word of advice. My sister values privacy. Questions about her past make her uncomfortable. It's best to focus on your duties and leave family matters to the family." He left before Imani could respond. She stared at the envelope, understanding the transaction clearly. Here's money. Don't ask questions, don't rock the boat, just accept your place. But the interaction had told her more than Julian realized. He'd confirmed Cassandra came from New York 15 years ago. He'd confirmed she'd had difficulties and personal matters, and his immediate defensiveness suggested those difficulties were something the family wanted buried. The attacks continued through Friday and into the following week. Cassandra created task after impossible task, each one designed to push Imani past her breaking point. Reorganize the wine cellar. Detail clean the conservatory glass. Inventory every piece of china and crystal in the house. Imani completed each task perfectly. She didn't complain. Didn't ask for help unless absolutely necessary. Didn't show frustration or exhaustion or fear. She simply worked. Maria pulled her aside on Wednesday afternoon. "How are you doing this? She gave you 3 full-time jobs this week." "I'm managing." "You're working 16-hour days. You look exhausted." "I'm fine." "Imani, this isn't sustainable. She's trying to break you." "I know." Imani's voice was calm. "But I won't break." That afternoon, Cassandra summoned Imani to her private sitting room. It was the first time Imani had been invited into Cassandra's personal space, a room decorated in whites and silvers, everything cold and perfect. Cassandra sat in a high-backed chair like a throne, her posture rigid. "Sit." Imani sat in the chair across from her, maintaining eye contact, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "You've completed the tasks I've assigned," Cassandra said. "Yes, ma'am. All of them, without complaint." "Yes, ma'am." Cassandra leaned forward slightly, studying Imani like a specimen under glass. "You're not like the others. Most people crack under pressure. They cry, they beg, they quit. But you—" She trailed off. "I'm doing my job, Miss Cassandra." "No, you're doing something else." Cassandra's eyes narrowed. "You're proving something. The question is what, and to whom?" Imani held her gaze steadily. "I'm proving I'm qualified for the position you hired me for. I didn't hire you. Julian's hiring service did. Nevertheless, I'm here, and I intend to do the work properly." The silence stretched between them, a battle of wills conducted entirely through eye contact and controlled breathing. Finally, Cassandra leaned back. "You'll be managing the spring gala. Full responsibility. Guest list, seating arrangements, service coordination. Everything. If a single detail goes wrong, you're finished. Not just fired, blacklisted. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." "I understand." "Do you?" This isn't about cleaning or organizing books. This is about managing 150 guests, including senators, tech executives, and celebrities. One mistake, and you're done. Imani stood, keeping her composure perfect. When is the gala, Miss Cassandra? 2 weeks from Saturday. I'll be ready. As Imani turned to leave, Cassandra's voice stopped her at the door. Why aren't you afraid of me? Imani looked back. I am afraid, Miss Cassandra. I'm just not willing to show it. She left before Cassandra could respond. Walking back to her office, Imani felt something settle in her chest. Cassandra had just made a critical error. She'd given Imani access to guest lists, to high-profile contacts, to the social circle where secrets were kept. And more importantly, Cassandra's frustration was showing. She was used to fear, to tears, to the emotional satisfaction of watching people break. Imani wasn't giving her that satisfaction. And that, Imani realized, was driving Cassandra absolutely insane. Good. That night, Imani sat in her small apartment, a rental she could barely afford on the edge of the city, and thought about fear. She'd seen fear in many forms during her career. Nonprofits afraid of losing funding, executives afraid of bad press, communities afraid of being forgotten. She'd learned to recognize it, to understand its patterns. And Natalia Holmes was afraid. It was there in the obsessive inspections, the impossible standards, the constant need to assert control. People who were secure didn't need to prove their power every single day. They didn't need to watch others break to feel whole. Cassandra's cruelty wasn't about maintaining excellence. It was about maintaining a facade. And facades only needed constant reinforcement when something was threatening to crack them. The question was what? What was Cassandra so desperate to hide? Imani opened her laptop. As house manager, she had access to the estate's administrative systems, including the digital archive of household records, vendor contracts, and historical documents. She'd been given the credentials her first day, told to familiarize herself with 15 years of operational history. She started with the basics: property records, tax documents, anything with Cassandra's name attached. What she found was oddly sparse. Natalia Holmes appeared in the household records exactly 15 years ago. Before that, nothing. No previous address listed, no employment history, no educational background. It was as if she'd materialized fully formed at age 30-something and simply moved into Holmes Manor. That wasn't normal. Even wealthy people left paper trails. Especially wealthy people. Property ownership, club memberships, charity boards. The rich documented their status obsessively. But Cassandra had no visible history before Holmes Manor. Imani shifted to public records. She searched news archives for Natalia Holmes going back 20 years. A few recent mentions came up, mostly society page items. Natalia Holmes, sister of tech mogul Julian Holmes, attended the museum gala. Nothing substantial, nothing before her arrival at the estate. She tried social media, though she knew wealthy families often avoided it. Nothing. No Facebook, no Instagram, no LinkedIn. Not even old, forgotten accounts. It was as if Natalia Holmes hadn't existed before 15 years ago. The next morning, Imani found Maria in the laundry room folding linens with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. "Maria, can I ask you something?" Maria glanced toward the door nervously. "About what?" "About when Miss Cassandra first arrived. You said it was 15 years ago?" "Around that, yes. Why?" Imani kept her voice casual, like she was just making conversation. "I'm just curious. What was she like back then? Different from now?" Maria's hand stilled on a pillowcase. "Why are you asking these questions?" Because I need to understand her, how to work with her. And I figure the people who've been here longest know her best. It was a reasonable explanation, and Maria seemed to accept it. She resumed folding, her movements slower, more thoughtful. She was quieter when she first came, stayed in her rooms mostly. Julian said she'd been through something difficult, that she needed time to recover. We were told not to bother her, to give her space. What kind of difficult thing? He never said exactly, just that she'd had some problems in New York and needed to be somewhere private, away from attention. Imani filed that away. Problems in New York, away from attention. And her friends? Did people visit her? Not at first. For maybe 6 months, she barely spoke to anyone. Then slowly she started going out again. But her social circle, it was different. Different how? Maria chose her words carefully. The people she knew in New York, whoever they were, they never came here, never called. It was like she'd cut them all off completely. When she started socializing again, it was all Julian's friends, his business associates, people from his world. That's unusual, isn't it? To completely abandon everyone you knew. I thought so at the time, but I figured maybe that was part of whatever she was recovering from. Maybe those friends were connected to her problems. Maria's voice dropped lower. There was one thing, though. About a year after she arrived, a woman came to the door. She was maybe 40, dressed nicely but not wealthy, you know. She asked to see Cassandra, said they were old friends. What happened? Cassandra came to the door, took one look at her, and went white. I mean white like she'd seen a ghost. She told Thomas, the old security chief, to remove the woman immediately, said she was trespassing. The woman tried to argue, said she just wanted to talk, but Thomas escorted her off the property. After that, Cassandra had him install the new security system, made everyone on staff sign confidentiality agreements. She said it was about privacy, but I always wondered if it was about keeping people out. Imani felt her pulse quicken. Did you catch the woman's name? No, but she called Cassandra something else. Not Cassandra. It was, I can't remember exactly. Started with a C, though. Carly? Chloe? Something like that. Chloe. The name hung in the air between them like a key turning in a lock. Are you sure? Not completely. It was 14 years ago, and I only heard it once before Thomas moved her away, but I remember thinking it was strange. Why would she use the wrong name? Unless it wasn't the wrong name, Imani thought. Unless Natalia Holmes wasn't Natalia Holmes at all. That evening, Imani returned to her laptop with new purpose. She searched for Chloe combined with New York and 15 years ago. Too many results, most of them irrelevant. She tried Chloe with Julian Holmes. Nothing useful. Then she tried a different approach. If Cassandra had problems in New York 15 years ago, problems serious enough that she needed to disappear, there might be news coverage. She searched for scandals, incidents, anything that might have happened around that time that could force someone to change their identity. She found dozens of stories: financial fraud, society scandals, messy divorces, but nothing that quite fit. Then she tried something else. She searched the estate's archived emails, using her administrative access. Most were mundane: vendor invoices, staff schedules, but buried deep in the system, she found a folder labeled Legal Confidential. It was password protected. Imani stared at the screen. This was crossing a line. Reading confidential legal files was grounds for termination. Possibly worse. But she thought about Maria's face when Cassandra had fired her over imaginary dust. About Miss Thompson, stripped of her pension after 20 years. About Jeffrey, blacklisted and destroyed. She thought about the woman who'd appeared at the door 14 years ago, calling Cassandra by a different name. Imani opened her notes and started trying passwords. Julian's birthday, the estate's address, common administrative codes. None worked. She sat back, thinking. What would Julian use for something he wanted to keep very private but might need to access quickly? She tried Margaret Holmes, the name of Julian's mother, who died when he was young. Nothing. Then she tried Dorothy Thompson, the beloved housekeeper who'd raised him. The folder opened. Inside were legal documents, NDAs, settlement agreements, and one PDF labeled Press Suppression Agreement, 2010. Imani's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The document was a contract between Julian Holmes and various media outlets paying substantial sums to remove and suppress coverage of an incident at the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala in April 2010. The incident involved Chloe Darnell, actress, who attempted to gain entry using fraudulent credentials and subsequently caused a public disturbance. Chloe Darnell. Not Natalia Holmes. Chloe Darnell. Imani screenshot the document and continued reading. There were details about the incident, how Chloe had claimed to be a member of a prominent family, how she'd been exposed mid-event, how she'd created a scene when confronted. The agreement specified that all photographs, video footage, and written coverage were to be removed from circulation. Julian Holmes had paid nearly $2 million to make the story disappear. And then, 6 months later, Chloe Darnell had apparently become Natalia Holmes and moved into his estate. Imani sat back, her mind racing. This was it. This was what Cassandra was so desperate to hide. Not just a scandal, but an entire identity. She'd tried to fake her way into high society, been publicly humiliated, and then Julian had rescued her, giving her a new name, a new life, and the protection of his wealth and reputation. No wonder she was obsessed with perfection. No wonder she needed to control every detail, to punish anyone who might see through the facade. Her entire existence at Holmes Manor was built on a lie that Julian's money had helped bury. And now Imani knew the truth. The question was what to do with it. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark, thinking. Knowledge was power, but it was also dangerous. If Cassandra discovered what Imani had found, there would be no limits to her retaliation. But for the first time since entering Holmes Manor, Imani felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Because the woman who terrorized an entire household, who destroyed lives without blinking, who seemed untouchable in her cruelty, had a secret. And secrets, Imani knew from years of communications work, were fragile things. They only took one word to shatter. Imani couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind circling around the name. Chloe Darnell. The press suppression document had given her the outline, but she needed the details. She needed to understand exactly what had happened at that gala, what Chloe Darnell had done that was worth $2 million to bury. At 3:00 a.m., she gave up on sleep and returned to her laptop. The challenge was that Julian had paid to scrub the story from mainstream sources, major news outlets, gossip sites, social media, all of it gone. But Imani had learned during her nonprofit work that the internet never truly forgets. Information gets buried, but it doesn't disappear. You just had to know where to look. She started with archived social media, old Twitter accounts, forgotten blogs, the kinds of places wealthy people didn't think to monitor. She searched for Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala, April 2010, combined with variations of scandal, incident, disruption. For 2 hours, she found nothing. Then, buried in the comments section of a defunct society blog, She found a single line from a user named NYSocialite2010, posted 3 days after the gala, before Julian's money could reach everywhere. Did anyone else witness the Chloe Darnell disaster at the Met last night? I'm still shook. She actually wore stolen jewelry and claimed her parents were the Vanderbilts. The Vanderbilts! Security literally escorted her out. Imani's pulse quickened. She screenshot the comment, then kept digging. She found a cached version of a small arts blog that had covered the gala. Most of the post had been scrubbed, but fragments remained in the Google cache. Local actress Chloe Darnell caused a scene when confronted about family connections proven false, heirloom necklace reported stolen from. The specific details were gone, deleted, but the outline was forming. Then she found the photograph. It was on an obscure photography portfolio site, buried in a folder labeled Event Photography 2010. The photographer had probably forgotten it was there, or maybe didn't realize what he'd captured. It was a candid shot from the gala, not official press photography. The image showed a woman in an expensive-looking gown, surrounded by security personnel. Her face was partially turned away, but her profile was clear. Dark hair in an elaborate updo, sharp features. The same cold eyes Imani saw every day. But this woman wasn't composed. This woman was in mid-shout, her face contorted with rage and humiliation. A security guard had his hand on her arm. Other guests had turned to watch, their expressions a mixture of shock and barely concealed glee at witnessing a social execution. The caption read, "Unidentified guest removed from Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala, April 17, 2010. Unidentified, because Julian's money had made sure she stayed that way. Imani saved the image and continued searching. She found references to the incident in 3 more obscure sources. A comment on a fashion forum. Remember that girl who tried to pass herself off as old money and got caught wearing a stolen necklace? Wild. A deleted Reddit thread that still showed up in search results. Society scandal at Met Gala. Anyone have details? But the most valuable find came from an archived podcast transcript. A small, now defunct arts and culture podcast had done an episode about social climbing in New York. Buried in the transcript was a detailed account. So there was this aspiring actress, Chloe Darnell, who'd been trying to break into high society for years. She'd take small acting gigs to pay rent, but spent all her money on designer dresses and fake credentials. She somehow got an invitation to the Met Museum Charity Gala in 2010, one of the most exclusive events of the season. She showed up wearing this stunning sapphire necklace, telling everyone it was a family heirloom passed down from her great-grandmother, who she claimed was related to the Vanderbilt family. She name-dropped constantly, talked about her trust fund, her family's estates, her connections. For the first hour, people believed her. Then someone, I think it was actually someone who knew the real Vanderbilt family, started asking specific questions. What was her great-grandmother's maiden name? Which estate had she spent summers at? The questions got more pointed. Chloe's answers got more desperate and inconsistent. Finally, someone recognized the necklace. It had been reported stolen from an estate sale 3 months earlier. Museum security was called. They pulled her aside. She lost it completely. Started screaming that everyone was jealous, that she belonged there, that her family was just as good as theirs. It was this total public meltdown in front of maybe 150 of New York's most influential people. Security literally had to drag her out. The whole thing was captured on people's phones. Within hours, it was all over social media. She was completely destroyed socially. Her acting career ended before it began. The story was everywhere for about 48 hours. Then suddenly, nothing. Every article disappeared. Every photo vanished. Someone with serious money had made it all go away. Imani read the transcript 3 times, making sure she understood every detail. Chloe Darnell had built an elaborate lie. She'd stolen jewelry to support her fake identity. She'd claimed a family connection she didn't have. And when confronted, she'd had a complete public breakdown in front of New York's elite. That kind of humiliation didn't just fade. It destroyed people. Chloe Darnell's entire identity, her dreams, her carefully constructed persona, had shattered in one evening. And then, Julian Holmes had saved her. Imani searched for connections between Julian and Chloe. It took another hour, but she finally found it in an old casting database. Chloe Darnell had appeared in exactly 3 productions, all small, all forgettable. But one of them was a corporate training video produced by Holmes Tech in 2009. That was the connection. She'd worked for one of Julian's companies. Maybe he'd felt responsible. Maybe he'd genuinely cared about her. Or maybe he'd just seen an opportunity to help someone who desperately needed help and who would be forever grateful, forever loyal, forever under his control. Whatever his motivation, he'd given Chloe Darnell a new identity, a new life. And in return, she'd become Natalia Holmes, living in his house, protected by his wealth, desperate to never let anyone see the truth of who she really was. No wonder she was terrified of imperfection. No wonder she needed absolute control. Her entire existence was built on the foundation of a lie. Every day she spent at Holmes Manor, she was one recognition away, one question away, one investigation away from being exposed as the fraud she'd always been. And that's why she destroyed people like Miss Dot and Jeffrey and Maria. Anyone who'd been at the estate long enough, who might ask questions, who might remember details that didn't quite add up. She needed them gone, or terrified into silence. Imani sat back from her laptop as dawn light began filtering through her apartment windows. She felt a strange mixture of triumph and sadness. Triumph, because she'd found the truth. Natalia Holmes's power, her cruelty, her entire reign of terror at Holmes Manor was built on a foundation of stolen jewelry and lies. Sadness, because underneath the monster, there was just a desperate woman who destroyed herself trying to be something she wasn't. But the sadness didn't change what needed to happen. Cassandra had used her reinvention as a license to torture others. She'd taken Julian's gift of a second chance and turned it into a weapon against people who had no power, no protection, no way to fight back. Imani thought about the spring gala, now just 10 days away. Cassandra had given her full control, expecting her to fail, expecting the pressure to break her. But Cassandra had made a critical error. She'd given Imani access to the guest list, to the same social circle where her humiliation had happened 15 years ago. People with long memories. People who would recognize the name Chloe Darnell if they heard it. Imani opened her laptop and created a new document. She typed everything she'd found. The press suppression agreement, the photograph, the podcast transcript, the stolen sapphire necklace, the false claim about the Vanderbilts, the public meltdown. She saved it in 3 separate locations, ensuring it could never be fully deleted. Then, she closed the laptop and got ready for work. She had a gala to plan, and a monster to face. But now she had something she hadn't had before. She had the truth, and truth, she'd learned long ago, was the most powerful weapon that existed. Natalia Holmes had spent 15 years building an empire of fear on a foundation of lies. Imani Washington was about to show her how quickly lies could crumble. All it would take was one word. Chloe. The spring gala arrived with the kind of perfect weather that felt orchestrated. Clear skies, mild temperature, the estate's gardens in full bloom. Imani had spent 10 days planning every detail. Seating charts arranged and rearranged. Menu tastings coordinated. Service staff briefed and rebriefed. Floral arrangements positioned exactly to Cassandra's specifications. She'd done it all perfectly, deliberately, meticulously perfectly, because she needed Cassandra to have no legitimate reason to attack her. When the confrontation came, and Imani knew it would come, it needed to be absolutely clear that it was about Cassandra's need for dominance, not about Imani's performance. The guests began arriving at 7:00 p.m. Senators and their spouses, tech executives, celebrities whose faces Imani recognized from magazines. They moved through the estate's grand dining hall, a room that had been transformed into something from a dream. White linens on round tables, golden chandeliers casting warm light, potted palms creating intimate corners. Everything elegant, expensive, perfect. Imani wore her house manager uniform, crisp and professional, and moved through the room ensuring everything flowed smoothly. She was invisible in the way staff always were at these events, present but not present, seeing everything while being seen by no one. She watched Julian Holmes work the room, shaking hands, making introductions. He looked more relaxed than she'd seen him, in his element among peers and colleagues. This was his world. Technology, innovation, the future. Not the suffocating atmosphere his sister created in their home. And there was Cassandra. She'd dressed for the evening like she was attending a royal wedding. A private dressmaker bespoke single-breasted, belted, tan, long coat over an elegant dress, chunky silver jewelry at her wrists and throat. Her hair was pulled back in an elaborate updo. She looked stunning, powerful, every inch the sophisticated socialite. But Imani could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes constantly scanned the room, measuring, evaluating, looking for anything out of place. Imani had met Beatrice Harrington earlier, a blonde woman in her 40s who served on multiple charity boards and whose opinion could make or break social reputations. She was exactly the kind of person Cassandra needed to impress, exactly the kind of audience Cassandra craved. The dinner service began flawlessly. Each course emerged from the kitchen perfectly timed, perfectly plated. The wine pairings were exact. The staff moved with practiced efficiency. Imani stood near the service entrance, coordinating, ensuring nothing went wrong. Maria was in the kitchen overseeing final touches. Elena was managing the wine service. Thomas was positioned discreetly near the exits. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Imani saw Cassandra's expression shift around the third course. She'd been watching the service, waiting for an error, and finding none. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers drummed against her water glass. She needed a reason, a flaw, an excuse to demonstrate her power in front of her guests. And then Imani saw Cassandra's eyes land on her. It was like watching a predator lock onto prey. Cassandra's entire focus shifted. She said something to the man beside her, then stood from her seat. The room's ambient conversation continued, but Imani felt the shift. Several guests glanced toward Cassandra as she moved across the dining hall, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She was walking directly toward Imani. Imani's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression calm, professional. She'd been preparing for this moment for 10 days, for 3 weeks really, since the first time she'd intervened to save Maria. Cassandra stopped 5 feet away, her voice carrying just loud enough to make nearby conversations falter. "Ms. Washington." A word. "Of course, Miss Cassandra." Imani stepped away from the service entrance into the open space of the dining hall where more guests could see them. Cassandra followed, closing the distance. "I've been observing the service this evening." "Yes, ma'am. Is there a problem?" "There is, actually. A significant one. Cassandra's voice rose slightly. More heads turned. I specifically instructed that the main course be served at 8:30. It's now 8:33. Imani had anticipated this. The head chef recommended delaying 3 minutes to ensure the duck reached optimal temperature, ma'am. I made the judgment call to prioritize quality over precise timing. You made a judgment call? Cassandra's voice went sharp, cutting. You don't make judgment calls, Ms. Washington. You follow instructions. My instructions. The dining hall was going quiet now. Conversations dying as more guests turned to watch. Julian half rose from his seat. Cassandra, perhaps we could discuss this after. Sit down, Julian. Cassandra didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Imani. This is about maintaining standards in our home. Standards that apparently Ms. Washington believes she can disregard. Imani kept her voice level. I apologize if you feel I overstepped, Miss Cassandra. The food quality was my primary concern. The food quality? Cassandra laughed, but there was no humor in it. The food quality is fine. What's not fine is your attitude, your constant subtle defiance, your belief that you somehow know better than I do. She stepped closer, and Imani could see it now. The barely controlled rage, the need to destroy someone in front of an audience. This was the same woman who'd had a public meltdown at the Met 15 years ago, just better dressed, better hidden behind Julian's money and a stolen identity. You've been a problem since the day you arrived, Cassandra continued, her voice rising, questioning my decisions, interfering with my management of the staff, acting like you're something more than what you are. Beatrice Harrington and the other guests were watching openly now. A bald man in his 50s looked shocked. A younger man in a navy suit leaned forward, intent. The entire room had become an audience for Cassandra's performance. I gave you a chance, Cassandra said, her voice now carrying to every corner of the room. I gave you responsibility for this evening, and you've proven exactly what I suspected. You're not capable. You're not qualified. You're just another person who doesn't understand their place. Imani stood completely still, her hands at her sides, her expression calm. Inside, her heart was racing, but she refused to show it. You're fired, Cassandra announced. Effective immediately. Thomas, escort Ms. Washington off the property. And Ms. Washington, don't bother looking for work anywhere else in this city. I'll make sure every household, every business, every potential employer knows exactly what kind of employee you are. The threat hung in the air. This was it. The full display of Cassandra's power. The public execution. The reminder to everyone watching that she controlled not just this estate, but the entire social and professional network around it. Julian was standing now. Cassandra, this is excessive. The evening is going perfectly. There's no need. Stay out of this, Julian. Cassandra's voice was ice. This is my house too. These are my standards, and I will not have them undermined. She turned back to Imani, triumph visible in her eyes. She'd won. She'd broken another person. She'd demonstrated her power in front of everyone who mattered. Except Imani wasn't broken. Imani stood there, meeting Cassandra's gaze with perfect calm. And in that moment, Cassandra's expression flickered. Just for a second. Uncertainty. Confusion. Why wasn't this woman afraid? Why wasn't she begging? Why wasn't she giving Cassandra the satisfaction of watching her crumble? And that's when Imani spoke. Her voice was quiet, but in the silent dining hall, every word carried perfectly. Is that really how you want to do this, Chloe? The name fell into the silence like a stone into still water. The ripples spread outward, touching every person in the room. Chloe. Cassandra's face went white, not pale, white. Like every drop of blood had drained from her body in an instant. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. "What did you say?" Imani's voice remained steady, professional, but loud enough that every guest could hear. "I said Chloe. That is your name, isn't it? Chloe Darnell?" The room held its breath. Beatrice Harrington's eyes went wide. The bald man leaned forward. Julian Holmes stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror. "I don't," Cassandra's voice cracked. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Imani took a single step forward, not aggressive, just present. Solid. Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala, April 17th, 2010. You wore a stolen sapphire necklace, the one you claimed was a family heirloom from your great-grandmother. The great-grandmother you said was related to the Vanderbilt family. Cassandra swayed slightly on her feet. Her hand went to her throat, an unconscious gesture, as if she could still feel the weight of that stolen jewelry. "That's—" She looked around wildly, searching for an escape. "That's ridiculous. Julian, she's—" The necklace had been reported stolen from an estate sale 3 months earlier. Imani continued, her voice calm and factual, like she was reciting a simple truth. When someone at the gala recognized it, when security confronted you, you had what witnesses described as a complete breakdown. You screamed that you belonged there, that your family was just as good as theirs. Security had to physically remove you from the event. Several guests gasped. Beatrice Harrington's hand went to her mouth. A woman near the back stood up to get a better view. "Stop," Cassandra whispered. "Stop talking." The incident was captured on dozens of phones. It was all over social media for approximately 48 hours. Imani's gaze never wavered. And then, it all disappeared. Every article, every photograph, every mention. Someone spent approximately $2 million making sure Chloe Darnell's humiliation was erased from public record. Julian's face had gone gray. He sank back into his chair like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "But not everything can be erased," Imani said. "There's still a photograph, on an obscure portfolio website, forgotten but accessible. There are cached blog posts, podcast transcripts. The internet never completely forgets, Miss Cassandra. Or should I say, Miss Darnell." Cassandra's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. Her hands were shaking. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The powerful woman who'd terrorized an entire household for 15 years was disintegrating in front of 150 witnesses. "You came here afterwards," Imani continued. "Julian gave you a new name, a new identity, a new life. And instead of being grateful, instead of using that second chance to be better, you turned this house into your personal kingdom of fear. You fired Miss Dot Thompson after 20 years of loyal service. You destroyed Jeffrey's career over nothing. You nearly did the same to Maria. And you've terrorized every person who's worked here using your brother's money and influence as a weapon." Imani's voice hardened just slightly. "All because you were terrified someone would see through your perfect facade and recognize you for what you really are. A fraud. A liar. Someone who stole jewelry and invented a family history to pretend she belonged somewhere she didn't." "Please." Cassandra's voice was barely audible. Tears were streaming down her face, destroying her perfect makeup. "Please don't." "Don't what? Tell the truth? Isn't that what you've been demanding from everyone else? Perfection? Honesty? Standards?" Imani gestured around the room. "These people deserve to know who you really are. The staff you've tormented deserve justice. Dorothy Thompson deserves her pension restored." Beatrice Harrington spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. "Is this true, Julian?" Julian didn't answer. He couldn't seem to find words. He just stared at his sister, watching her fall apart, and the guilt on his face told everyone everything they needed to know.
"My God," Beatrice said. "Natalia Holmes doesn't exist. You've been lying to all of us for 15 years.
Other guests began whispering, the sound building like a wave. This would be all over the society pages by morning. Cassandra's carefully reconstructed reputation was disintegrating faster than it had been built. "So here's what's going to happen," Imani said, and her voice cut through the rising noise like a blade. "You have two choices, Chloe. The first option is that you leave this estate tonight. You never return. You never contact any member of the staff again. You release Miss Dott's pension immediately, and you allow Julian to provide proper severance to everyone you've wronged. You disappear quietly. And this story stays contained to this room." She paused, letting that sink in. "The second option is that I walk out of here, go straight to every news outlet in the city, and tell them everything. The stolen necklace, the fake family history, the cover-up, Julian's $2 million press suppression, the 15 years of abuse you've inflicted on people who couldn't fight back. I have documentation. I have photographs. I have enough evidence to make sure Chloe Darnell's story becomes national news by tomorrow afternoon." Cassandra's legs gave out. She grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling, her knuckles white against the upholstery. "You can't," she whispered. "You can't do this to me. I can. And I will. Unless you walk away right now." Imani's voice was steady, implacable. "You spent 15 years using power you didn't earn to destroy people who couldn't defend themselves. You made them invisible while demanding to be seen. That ends tonight." "Julian." Cassandra turned to her brother, desperate. "Julian, stop her. Please. I'm your sister." Julian stood slowly. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. "You're not my sister. My sister died with our parents. I helped Chloe Darnell because I felt sorry for her, because I thought giving her a second chance would help her become better." He looked at her with something that might have been pity or might have been disgust. "Instead, you used my guilt to build a prison for innocent people." "No," Cassandra whispered. "No, please. Leave, Chloe." Julian's voice was firm now. "Tonight. I'll have Thomas pack your things and send them wherever you want. But you don't live here anymore." Cassandra looked around the room at all the faces watching her. Some showed shock. Some showed disgust. Some showed satisfaction at watching someone powerful get exactly what they deserved. She looked back at Imani, and in her eyes was pure hatred mixed with absolute defeat. "You've destroyed me," she said. "No." Imani's voice was quiet, but clear. "You destroyed yourself 15 years ago. You just spent all this time destroying others to avoid facing that truth." Cassandra straightened, trying to gather some last shred of dignity. It didn't work. The tan coat that had looked so elegant now seemed like a costume. The jewelry looked fake. Everything about her looked false, because now everyone could see what had always been there beneath the surface. She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble for the last time. Thomas followed at a respectful distance. The moment she disappeared, the dining hall erupted in conversation. But Imani didn't hear it. She was looking at Maria, who stood in the kitchen doorway with tears streaming down her face, mouthing, "Thank you." At Elena, who was smiling for the first time since Imani had met her. At the other staff members who'd emerged from the shadows, watching their tormentor leave forever. Julian approached Imani, his face aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "How did you find out?" "I looked. That's all. I just looked at what was always there. I should have stopped her years ago. He trailed off. "I'll make this right. The staff, Miss Dot, everyone she hurt. I promise."
Imani nodded. See that you do. She walked toward the service entrance,
but Beatrice Harrington intercepted her. Ms. Washington, I run 3 charity foundations. We could use someone with your skills, someone who sees the truth and isn't afraid to speak it.
Thank you, Mrs. Harrington. I'll consider it. Please do. Beatrice smiled. What you did tonight took extraordinary courage.
Imani left the dining hall and found Maria waiting in the corridor. The older woman hugged her, holding on tight.
She's really gone?
She's really gone.
Because of you. Because of the truth, Imani corrected. All I did was say it out loud.
But as she walked through the house, past the perfect rooms and polished surfaces, past the facade of elegance that had hidden so much cruelty, Imani felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not just relief, not just satisfaction. Justice. One word had been enough. Chloe. That's all it had taken to shatter 15 years of lies. Sometimes the truth didn't need to shout. It just needed to be spoken. The guests began leaving within the hour. Some offered quiet congratulations to Julian. Others simply departed without comment, already composing the messages they'd send to their social circles. By midnight, Holmes Manor was empty except for the staff and Julian. Imani stayed to oversee the cleanup, as was her job. Maria and Elena worked alongside her, clearing tables, collecting linens, restoring the dining hall to its usual pristine state. But something was different now. The tension that had permeated every corner of the house for years had lifted. People spoke in normal voices. Someone laughed. Elena actually smiled. Thomas appeared in the doorway around 1:00 a.m. She's gone. Took 3 suitcases and called a car service. Didn't say where she was going. Good riddance, Maria said quietly, then crossed herself as if apologizing for the unkind words. Don't apologize, Thomas said. I should have stood up to her years ago. We all should have. She made that impossible, Imani said, folding a tablecloth with mechanical precision. That was the point. She created an environment where speaking up meant destruction. None of you failed. She did. Julian appeared in the doorway behind Thomas. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than his 6-foot frame. His expensive suit was rumpled. His tie was loosened. He'd aged a decade in a single evening. Could everyone give us a moment? He asked. I need to speak with Ms. Washington privately. The staff filed out, Maria squeezing Imani's hand once as she passed. Then it was just Imani and Julian in the enormous dining hall, surrounded by the remnants of the evening's catastrophe. Julian walked to one of the windows, looking out at the dark gardens. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Holmes. I do. I owe you and every person who's worked in this house. He turned to face her. I knew what she was doing. Not all of it, maybe, but enough. And I did nothing. I told myself I was being kind, giving her a second chance, but really I was just avoiding conflict. Imani set down the tablecloth she'd been folding. Why did you help her? Back then, after the gala incident. Julian sighed, running a hand through his hair. She worked for one of my companies. Just a small role in a training video. But I saw the aftermath of what happened to her. She'd tried to kill herself 2 weeks after the Met Gala. Pills. Her roommate found her in time. He paused. She had no one. No real family. No friends. The acting career was over. She was completely alone. And I thought I could help. I thought giving her a new identity, a safe place, would let her heal. But instead she became the thing that destroyed her. Yes. Julian's voice was heavy. She became obsessed with being seen as legitimate, as belonging. Every person she fired, every rule she enforced, it was all about proving she was better than what she'd been. that she deserved to be here. She didn't prove anything, Imani said quietly. She just hurt people. I know. And I let her. Because confronting her meant confronting my own failure. Admitting I'd brought someone into my home who was toxic. Admitting my charity had created a monster. He looked at Imani directly. How did you find out? I paid a lot of money to bury that story. I observed, Imani said simply. You hired me to manage the house. I managed the problem. It's more than that. Most people would have just endured, would have kept their heads down, collected their paychecks, avoided trouble. I tried that for about 3 days. Then I watched her nearly destroy Maria over imaginary dust. That's when I decided enduring wasn't an option. Imani met his eyes. You have resources I don't have. Money, influence, power. You could have stopped her at any point. But you didn't. So someone else had to. Julian flinched at the truth of it. You're right. I should have. I was a coward. You were complicit, Imani corrected. There's a difference. Cowardice is fear. Complicity is choice. You chose to let it continue because stopping it would have been uncomfortable for you. The words hung between them, harsh but necessary. Julian didn't argue. He just stood there, accepting the weight of them. What happens now? He asked finally. That depends on you. Are you going to honor what you said in there? About making things right for the staff? Yes, absolutely. Julian's voice was firm now. Miss Dot gets her full pension, plus compensation for the years she lost. Jeffrey gets a reference and financial support to restart his career. Maria, Elena, Thomas, everyone who suffered under her, they all get bonuses and my personal apology. And going forward, I actually pay attention to what happens in my own house. He paused. I'd like you to stay on as house manager. With a significant raise, you've more than earned it. Imani considered this. I'll stay on 3 conditions. First, no more silent enabling. If you see abuse, you address it immediately. Second, the staff gets regular reviews by an outside HR consultant to ensure they're being treated properly. Third, I have direct access to you if issues arise without going through intermediaries. Agreed. All of it. Julian managed a small smile. You negotiate well. I ran my own business before this. I learned to value my worth. Imani picked up the tablecloth again, resuming her work. One more thing, Mr. Holmes. Your sister needs help. Real help. Therapy, support. Something more than just money and a new name. She's not actually my sister. I know, but you gave her that identity. That makes you responsible for what comes next. Don't just exile her and forget she exists. That's how this happened in the first place. Julian nodded slowly. You're right. I'll make sure she gets proper support. Professional help. A therapist who specializes in identity issues and trauma. Good. They worked in silence for a few minutes, Julian helping to fold tablecloths despite his expensive suit. It was strange, seeing a billionaire doing manual labor alongside his house manager. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that's what should have been happening all along. People working together instead of hiding behind titles and money. Can I ask you something? Julian said. When you spoke tonight, when you said her name, you weren't afraid. Not even a little. How? Imani thought about it. I was terrified. But I learned something running my business and losing it. Fear is useful when it protects you, but when it controls you, when it keeps you from doing what's right, it becomes another kind of prison. Chloe was terrified of being exposed, so she built a prison of control. You were afraid of confrontation, so you built a prison of avoidance. I decided I wasn't going to build any more prisons.
You showed me the courage I lack, Julian said quietly. No, I showed you what's possible when you stop letting fear make your decisions. You have that courage too, Mr. Holmes. You just haven't been using it. Maria appeared in the doorway.
Mr. Holmes, there's someone at the gate. Says her name is Dorothy Thompson. Says she heard what happened tonight and wants to come home.
Julian's face transformed.
Miss Dot, of course. Let her in immediately. And Maria, prepare the guest suite in the East Wing. The Blue Room, that was always her favorite. As Maria hurried away, Julian turned back to Imani.
Thank you. For tonight. For all of this. For being brave enough to do what I should have done years ago. Just make sure you stay brave, Imani said. That's the real work. Not one moment of courage, but choosing it every day. Julian nodded and left to greet Miss Dot. Imani finished folding the last tablecloth and looked around the dining hall. Tomorrow, she'd start implementing real changes. Better protocols, staff protections, a culture based on respect instead of fear. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply feel what had happened. She'd walked into Holmes Manor 6 weeks ago, broken and desperate, willing to be invisible to survive. She was leaving this dining hall as someone who'd spoken truth to power and won. Not because she was special, but because she'd been willing to look, to investigate, to care enough about others to risk herself. Sometimes that was all it took. Someone willing to say the truth out loud. One word, Chloe. That's all it had taken to free an entire household. 3 months later, Imani stood in the conference room of the Holmes Philanthropic Trust, looking out at the city below. The office was on the 28th floor of a building downtown, far from Holmes Manor. The trust had always existed, Julian's vehicle for charitable giving, but it had operated quietly, writing checks and avoiding attention. That was about to change. Behind her, the conference table held folders, each one representing a life that had been changed. Dorothy Thompson, Jeffrey Pierce, Maria Santos. 12 other former Holmes Manor staff members who'd been fired or forced out over the years. Julian had kept his word. Every single person had received full compensation, restored pensions and personal apologies. But Imani had pushed for more than apologies. She'd pushed for prevention. The door opened and Julian entered, followed by 3 board members of the trust. They took their seats, and Imani turned to face them. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know you've all read my proposal, but I wanted to present it in person." She pulled up her presentation on the screen. The title slide read, "The Dignity Fund, a legal defense and financial safety net for service workers." The incident at Holmes Manor wasn't unique, Imani began. Across this country, domestic workers, service industry employees, and people in positions without power face abuse every single day. They're fired without cause, harassed, exploited, and they have no recourse because they can't afford lawyers. They can't risk unemployment. They can't fight back without losing everything. She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics. Domestic workers in particular are among the most vulnerable. Many are immigrants, most are women. Many are supporting families, and the abuse happens behind closed doors where no one sees it. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia, leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A fund that provides 3 things, Imani said. "First, emergency financial assistance for workers who've been wrongfully terminated, enough to cover rent, food, and necessities while they find new employment. Second, free legal representation for workers facing abuse, discrimination, or wrongful termination. Third, job placement assistance and references from trusted sources." She clicked through slides showing the proposed budget, the partnership structure with legal aid organizations, the application process. This isn't charity, Imani emphasized. This is justice. These workers have earned dignity. We're just making sure they can access it. Julian spoke up. I think it's an excellent use of the Trust's resources. Imani has done the research. She's built the framework. I move that we approve the initial funding of $5 million. Seconded, Patricia said immediately. The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, Julian walked with Imani back to her new office. It was modest, but professional, with windows and space to think. Her desk held a photograph of her old business, a reminder of where she'd come from. You could have just taken the house manager raise and stayed comfortable, Julian said. Why push for this? Because comfort isn't enough. Imani sat at her desk, pulling up a document. I was comfortable once, running my business. Then it all disappeared, and I learned what it feels like to be invisible, to have skills and experience and still be treated as disposable. That feeling, that knowledge, it's too valuable to waste. So you're using it to help others? I'm using it to change the system that made me feel that way in the first place. Julian nodded slowly. You know, when I hired the service that found you, I was just looking for someone competent to manage the house. I never expected to meet someone who would transform everything. You didn't hire me to transform anything. You hired me to be invisible and competent. I chose to be visible instead. And I'm grateful you did. He paused at the door. Chloe checked into a treatment facility in Connecticut. Intensive therapy for identity issues and trauma. She sent me a letter last week. First time she's contacted me since that night. What did it say? That she's sorry. That she knows sorry isn't enough. That she's trying to understand why she became what she became. Julian's voice was sad. I don't know if she'll ever fully heal, but at least she's trying. After he left, Imani opened her email. Applications for the Dignity Fund had started coming in, even before the official launch. Word traveled fast in service worker communities. Each application was a story of abuse survived, dignity maintained despite impossible circumstances, courage in the face of power. One application in particular caught her attention. It was from Maria Santos. Imani read it twice, then picked up her phone. Maria, I got your application. You don't need to apply. You're already approved. Maria's voice came through, hesitant. Are you sure? I'm not asking for much. Just enough to retire properly, to have some security. You're getting more than security. Full pension restoration, health care coverage, and a grant to cover your mother's medical expenses. It's already approved. Silence on the other end. Then quiet crying. Maria? I never thought I'd be able to stop working. I'm 63 years old. I've been cleaning houses since I was 20, and I thought I'd die doing it. You won't. You're retiring with dignity. That's what this fund is for. 2 weeks later, they held a small ceremony at the trust offices. Maria was the first official recipient of the Dignity Fund. Dorothy Thompson attended, healthy and smiling, working part-time as a consultant for the fund's screening committee. Jeffrey Pierce was there too, back in security work at a firm that valued his experience. Imani stood at the front of the room, looking at the faces of people who'd survived Cassandra's reign and emerged stronger. The Dignity Fund exists because of what happened at Holmes Manor, she said. But it's not about revenge. It's not even about justice for what's past. It's about prevention. It's about making sure the next Maria, the next Jeffrey, the next Dorothy has options, has support, has a voice. She looked directly at Maria. You spent 12 years being told you were invisible. You're not. You never were. And this fund exists to make sure every worker knows that. Maria stood and hugged Imani, holding on tight. You gave me my life back. No, Imani said quietly. You survived and kept your dignity through 12 years of abuse. You did that. I just made sure the world recognized it. That evening, Imani returned to her apartment. It was the same small rental, though she could afford better now. But she'd decided to save the extra income, to remember what it felt like to count every dollar. She opened her laptop and looked at the Dignity Fund dashboard. 23 applications already. 23 people who needed help, who deserved dignity, who'd been invisible for too long. She thought about 6 months ago. Standing in Holmes Manor's supply room, listening to Maria warn her about Cassandra, feeling powerless and desperate, willing to accept invisibility to survive. She thought about the moment in the dining hall when she'd spoken the name, Chloe. One word that changed everything. But the truth was, the word hadn't been the power. The power had been in the courage to speak it, the willingness to risk everything for what was right, the understanding that silence protected abusers and destroyed the abused. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Board-approved expansion funding. 10 million over 3 years. You're changing lives, Imani. She smiled and typed back, We're changing lives. That's what power should do. She stood at her window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, service workers were finishing their shifts. Some were being treated with respect. Others were enduring abuse, believing they had no options, no voice, no way out. But now they did. The Dignity Fund existed. Maria's retirement proved it was real. The system was changing, slowly but surely. Imani had entered Holmes Manor broken and desperate, willing to be invisible. She was leaving with a platform, a voice, and a mission. Not because she'd destroyed a monster, though she had. Not because she'd uncovered secrets, though she had done that too. But because she'd learned that true power wasn't in the truth itself. It was in having the courage to speak it, even when speaking meant risking everything. She'd been invisible once. Now she was building a foundation to make sure others could be seen. That was the difference between survival and transformation, between enduring and changing, between accepting the world as it was and building the world as it should be. One word had freed a household, but the real work, the lasting work, was using that freedom to free others. And that work was just beginning. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.